right, guys, the final pay-per-view of the year is almost upon us. So who better than preview it than this next man? The great man himself, Luke Thomas, is back to finish the year with a bang. And of course, the event is available on KO Sports, a main event here in Australia on Sunday from 2 p.m. AED. LT, what do you say, man? What do you say?
Been a crazy year, a fun year, a dumb year, everything in between. Glad to be here for it. Thank you for having me.
Dude, it's a pleasure. Now, we usually start these things off by doing a little rating out of 10. And for this one, UFC 310, where do you sit on this one, Luke? How would you rate this one out of 10?
Okay, let me look at the card here just in totality, just before I just sort of speak out of turn here. Let's see here. Okay, UFC 310. I like the main event. I'll say that. I like the main event. I actually really like the main event. I think it could be kind of interesting. But I recognize it's a dead letter for the casual fan. Co-main event, we'll get to it, I'm sure. Rakhmonov and Garry, freaking love it. 5 rounds. That's a 2 thumbs up for me. Gane versus Volkov, we've already seen it. Don't mind it because of where both guys are in the division and where the division is more generally. Bryce Mitchell versus Kron Gracie, a battle of the flat earthers. Who will win? I don't know. Kind of fun matchup, though, when you think about it. Probably going to be weird. Kron's definitely awesome, but weird. And Bryce Mitchell, I think, has certainly been more active and better at MMA. And then, you know, you go down the parts of the preliminary card. You got Nate Landwehr and Korean Superboy. I don't have, you know, Smith versus Reyes seems like a last stand. Vicente Luque was supposed to fight Nick Diaz, and you have the fill-in. But then you got Sterling versus Movsar Evloev. And then on down there, they added Chris Weidman and Eric Anders to it, Michael Chiesa and Max Griffin. You know what? I'll give it a solid 7. Solid 7. How about that? Is that all right?
Yeah, I like that. I like that solid 7. It's an interesting one. I want to know, like, this idea of leaving Covington, Buckley for next weekend and the way they put this whole welterweight path down with, you know, Shavkat fighting Ian, Colby fighting Buckley, and I'm guessing they're going to try and do like JDM and Usman in Australia in February. Do you like the way they're booking this thing out? Do you like the way this is playing out?
For welterweight specifically?
Yeah.
Well, okay, so I had this conversation with BC today on Morning Combat, which was what fight? Now, forget the title implications or any of that. Just as a fight, what fight do you like better? And obviously, he's not eligible right now, but Bilal Muhammad versus Shavkat Rakhmonov, which was originally scheduled, or Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Ian Garry, and he had picked the latter. I think there's definitely a couple of permutations you could go with. Leon Edwards is looking for a dance partner. They could end up giving him Sean Brady, which would leave Jack Della Maddalena to have a bigger fight in Australia for the first quarter of 2025. I'll say this, like, I don't know that these are all perfect permutations, right? I don't know if these are like the exact right fights to make. They don't quite feel that way, but they all feel pretty good in their own way. Like, there's nothing immediately objectionable about them. They have value in terms of sorting who's coming or going in the division. They make for interesting style contrasts. They make for cool stories. Can Buckley get over the hump? Will Garry surprise? You know, is JDM, this is 2025 is going to be his year, whatever. So they're all good. Like, they're all good. It's just, it doesn't feel like any of them are like, it's great. It's a strong division, and they're matching up contenders in what feels like very important fights. It doesn't feel like any of it is destined. We didn't arrive here at like some special moment, but they're making effective use of a lot of talent, and I think it speaks for itself.
What do you think's on the line here with Shavkat and Ian? Obviously, you know, their records. One guy's this is high stakes for both guys because then one of the guys is going to go on. But in terms of title shots, right? Like, if Kamaru's fighting JDM in February, and let's say Kamaru goes out there and puts out a crazy performance, the winner of the fight this weekend, they're far from guaranteed a title shot, right? Like, I saw Ian say the UFC wasn't really committal about it. I spoke to Shavkat just before. He was saying, yeah, I get the title shot because Usman hasn't fought, but things can change pretty quickly in this division.
I suppose they could, but I'm still skeptical of like Usman skipping the line for a couple of reasons. I think when I went back and I did some tape study for the third fight with Leon, I could not believe. I mean, it's all of this hindsight is 2020, and sometimes things appear differently when you watch them in person and later on. And this is one of those cases where I just was the degradation in his athletic ability. Now, I know he had a very strong performance, even in a loss against Hamzat up at 185. But this would be back at 170, where there would be a premium on, I think, more speed than just power. And there was a big decline in his ability to accelerate. And I'll point people to it, exactly what I'm talking about. You have to go back to the number of times. And Craig Jones has pointed this out, fellow Australian, right? Craig Jones has pointed this out. In MMA, it's not that you can't wrestle with a flat back with your chest to the ground. You always want a flat back, but your positioning typically needs to be more upright for strong wrestling to take place once the penetration step and now the takedown is being attempted. You can get away with bending over at the waist and just running a guy into the fence, especially if you're an older fighter, because while there is some consequence to it, it's still pretty effective in ways that it would not be effective at all in like pure amateur or scholastic wrestling. And so fair enough, he gets a lot of that, but then, and some of it is effective, but not nearly as much as you might imagine. A lot of it, Leon is able to down block and get out of the way and then catch the underhooks because you can see it coming a mile away. I feel like JDM should very much be able to do something like that. I would favor JDM to win that one. And it's a tough fight, but I favor him to win. That's part one. Part two, very quickly, if I may, is that I understand if the UFC is less committal on Garry, but I think either guy has got a huge opportunity here. First of all, Shavkat already had this title fight. Like, he already had it. If he wins, it merely is a formalizing coronation that he would get right back to this spot. So, or the number one contender or whatever. So that's a foregone conclusion if he wins. If Garry wins, I think people are sleeping on like how significant that would be. That would be absolutely enormous. And yes, I know he's undefeated and he's doing great and whatever, but Rakhmonov is just another level of difficulty that he has simply not encountered yet. And to upset that guy on your way on short notice, I mean, it's what Buckley is doing would be important to raise his stakes, but it doesn't put him near the title level. I honestly think Garry could skip the line if he goes in there and then beats the guy who already was given a title shot in Rakhmonov, even if Usman beats JDM, which I don't find very likely. Sorry, it was a long answer.
No, I love that answer, man. I feel like for Garry as well, like the perception of the fans have kind of changed a little bit. Like, he was going through a couple of dips there, right? Like, fans weren't the biggest fans of some of the stuff that was happening outside of the fight game for him, and he was kind of becoming a little bit of a heel. I feel like him taking the toughest fight possible in the Shavkat fight, if he goes out there and beats him, what do you think that does to the Ian Garry brand? Because I feel like people are actually like, hey, man, at least this guy's going out here and fighting the best of the best.
Yeah, I mean,
his hand up.
Yeah, I'll say this. If you're a complete fucking wanker, and there's many of them in this community, not so much Submission Radio, but, you know, the broader sport. Yeah. No, Submission Radio is great. Not wankers.
Checks in the mail. Mail.
If you're a wanker, Garry winning is your 9/11. I mean, if you're the biggest fucking loser that ever lived, Garry winning is a nightmare for you. But for everybody else, it'd actually be kind of a cool story. Right. I mean, let's just be clear about it. Was he overexposed and pushed too hard? And was he a bit of a try hard at certain points in his come up? Yes, of course. And even to some extent, that's still true now. That's all fine. I mean, it's completely fair game. But like the media cycle he had to go to about his family is the most manufactured, dumb ass, nothing burger bullshit that has ever lived. Irrelevant at best, manufactured in its any attempts to find any truth in the claims that it makes about the world. Most of it just totally imagined and invented. Just the dumbest shit ever. But it did have an effect. Like, it did seek to convince people, or at least kind of affect the mood. But the point that you're talking about is, to me, totally right. Listen, MMA is crazy. Garry could absolutely win. I think Shavkat is favored, and I favor him to win, all probabilities being what they are. But Garry taking fights that nobody else wanted over and over and over again, calling out people that people think he would never call out due to stylistic advantages, or they were just ahead in the fight game, or they're, taking on Shavkat Rakhmonov on short notice as the entire boogeyman of the division, and he's accepting it no problem, and he's calling out people who wouldn't take fights with him, and he's showing up and getting the job done. Like, yes, this is a very difficult assignment on Saturday. We will see how it goes. But all you ever ask out of a fighter is, like, when it's your time to go, you step on the gas and make the most of it. And that's exactly what he's doing, throwing, in many cases, maybe inadvisably, caution to the wind. This is somebody that people thought was protected, that again was being pushed too hard as like a golden child who would never be under risk or, you know, real duress and would get favorable matchmaking. It gets, I mean, how much less favorable does it get than Shavkat Rakhmonov on short notice? And he signed up for it. You got to respect it. So, like, you know, are there parts of his personality that could be grating? Was he overexposed? Yes, of course. There's always things to dislike. But the tenor of things that affected how he was viewed was built on nothing. And so, therefore, something powerful can obliterate it in the right moment. Will that be Saturday? I guess we'll see. But that's certainly an opportunity for him.
I mean, he had an escape, right? He had Buckley. He could have just said, look, I'm training for this guy. So people don't really, and then he got a call in the middle of the night, said, yeah, I'll go for it. Kind of reminds me of Prime McGregor. Shavkat told me that one of the fights they wanted to make for this one was Alex Prades, but obviously he's got that injury. Imagine that fight between the two this coming weekend.
I mean, that dude I don't know how you say it. Prates. I don't know, but him versus Rakhmonov is a gunfight. Yeah, that's a gunfight.
But okay, so you're saying you're favoring Shavkat here. What is the path to victory for Ian Garry? Obviously, he's a master at trying to sort of keep that distance. He does move forward, and he is, you know, he's young in the game and pretty well-rounded. How do you think, how does he approach this puzzle that is Shavkat?
It's got to be stick and move, which is I mean, just think about this, right? Rakhmonov is not just undefeated, as you well know, and the entire audience knows. He's won every fight by finish. He is a fucking Terminator. And to me, I think if you give him 25 minutes against literally anyone in that division, that's a tough assignment, right? I mean, you mean to tell me Rakhmonov's got 25 minutes to get the job done? That's a lot of time. It's a lot of time. And so I just want to be clear, like, I'm not sure who matches up favorably with him. You could say maybe Bilal Muhammad, but he's, of course, the champion. And even that is still quite speculative. So understand the context here. So, but you're asking what's his best chance? I think a couple of things are really critical in this one. One is establishing of range, and that's going to be with jabs, front kicks, right? Anything to keep Rakhmonov on the end, because you know he's going to be pressuring. And given the Jeff Neal fight, he might walk into a fair number of things. So putting things in combination when it is time to go is going to be important, but he's going to have to be at the end of your punches. If he is crowding you, and he is now inside of his punching range, or you're up against the fence, or both, God help you if it's both, you know, it's going to be curtains for you. Like, you know, anybody in that division, it's going to be curtains for him. You simply cannot allow that against a guy like this. So I think part of it is establishing range, keeping him at the end of his punches, at the end of his kicks. You know, a lot of it's, you know, fast to the target, snapping, and then when the time is right, putting some combinations together. And then the other part of that in conjunction with it is going to be sticking and moving, right? Not just pumping the jab, but you're going to have to be on your horse. Lateral movement. You cannot be a stationary target. Recapturing center. All of those things. Not back it up in straight lines. Your footwork is going to have to be dynamic in this one. Really kind of keep you in those positions to have that range establishment, to have that jab pumping. That's one. The second part is avoiding the clinch along the fence. Rakhmonov will not only, I mean, right, you look at what he does and he ends up in these great positions, but a lot of times he allows these positions to develop when the other person is trying to kind of pursuing it, and then he uses that over pursuit for some kind of throw or to off balance them, get them to wrestle to their hands, and then he's off to the races. He can take the back from there if they go chest up to the sky, if the actual takedown works. He's got a really interesting style of ground and pound. I don't know if folks have paid attention to this. Rakhmonov will forego traditional gripping to control. And in that little short distance where he's not those short moments, I should say, where he's not establishing grips, he's instead bending over at the waist and firing punches. And what he does is he obviously gives up all the control, which means, you know, if he doesn't land in that short window, the whole thing is for naught. But he has very accurate and heavy ground and pound. And what ends up happening is it is usually successful, and he can build and build and build from there without ever establishing grips. He goes right to the punishment. It's kind of the opposite of what you see a lot of Dagestani guys do, which is, you know, go for the wrist rides, the leg turks, and then begin to unload with the punishment. Rakhmonov kind of turns it on its head. You have to stop that before it even gets started. If he finds himself in the over-under clinch, he has to find ways to clinch break and then use his footwork to get back to the center. All of those things, if any one of those fails, I don't know how he wins, which is why it seems like it's a tough assignment.
Obviously, they did a bit of sparring together. They trained together. You watch the footage. I mean, to me, it just looks like, it doesn't even look like hard sparring. It looks like more kind of moving around, more, you know, feeling each other out. And when I look at Shavkat in that sparring as well, it kind of looks like he's working on a couple of things for himself. Like he's not actually trying to dominate Ian. It looks like, he might be working on his head movement or one of those things that people don't realize that happens in sparring. Can you take much from what you see in that footage?
Not a lot, not much. This is why people like judging sparring footage. People, I think there are some people who think that like what sparring is, it's like fighting every time, where what you're doing is like that's how a fight would go because you'd make the same decisions. But you don't really know that. Yes, if two guys match up long enough and you've witnessed it long enough, you can probably tell who's getting the better of the other one over the course of time. But if you're doing jiu-jitsu, you might say, I'm going to play half guard this round and then work on reestablishing guard, or I'm going to work to sweep. Or if you're in the stand-up, I'm going to work on 2 different feints to set up the jab and see which one works. And both might fail. Your sweep also might not go anywhere. But that's not necessarily your game. That's not even your A or B game. It might even be something you haven't worked on very much at all. It's something you could be trying when the camera's on. So you have to be very, very careful. Plus, to the point you described, even if that's their A game, it's so low intensity as to not really, it's almost the equivalent of what they call in jiu-jitsu flow rolling, where 2 people are rolling, but what they're really doing is like they're letting each other get a move or a sweep or, something on it. And then they slowly kind of break out of it. And there's a little bit of intensity, but it's mostly about just keeping the position moving, keeping the sparring going. It looked like something maybe slightly more intense than that. I would be cautious trying to draw a big inference from it.
Let's talk about the main event for a sec, man. You mentioned you love this main event. Asakura, he's coming in for a title shot. And this is like not really what UFC has really done lately. Like they do it from time to time. They like to build up their fighters. What do you make of the UFC being like, you know what? This division needs a little bit of excitement. Let's get this guy in here. And why waste it? Let's just throw him in this main event. We usually see them try to build the fighters up, but there is like a bit of a mystique about him. And the way they're going about it is kind of cool because they're showing these crazy highlight packages of him knocking people out with knees and the street fighting with him and his brother. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of like a UFC promotion that we haven't seen for a while, right? Like where they used to bring guys in from Pride or different promotions back in the day. You'd be like, oh, whoa, this guy's an animal. Do you like what they're doing here by trying to sort of bring a bit of interest to this division by bringing Kai straight to the title shot in the main event here?
Yeah, I love it. I think they're doing the best they can with what they have in this division. Could you have made a different fight? Could you have put Royval back in there or something? I mean, you had some options. But first of all, you're asking a slightly different question. But just to speak about the style matchup, there's a lot of ways this could go badly for Asakura, but because of how well-rounded Pantoja is. But there's a couple of specific ways that it could go really well for Asakura, which could be just, it could serve the UFC's interests, and they have nothing to lose if it doesn't. So you have to just like the style matchup and the matchmaking for that reason. But the point you're talking about is like, they have to introduce this guy to the fans. The fans don't know him from Ryzen. They don't know him from his last win over Juan Archuleta, the former Bellator champion and former Ryzen champion as well. They don't know him. They don't know anything about him. They've seen the highlights. They've seen some of the stuff on Twitter or whatever, but they don't know. So like trying to make it a street fighting mystique. And to the point you made, I remember when all those guys, folks think that like all the Pride guys came over at once. It actually wasn't like that. They came over in waves. They came over at different times. I mean, there were a couple of punctuated moments, obviously, but even then, they didn't all debut on the same card. It took time for them to all come over. And I remember when they showed the first time they advertised Mirko Krokop coming over, the UFC didn't even have a photo of him that they could use. They just put up the Croatian flag on the screen. I remember this vividly. This is what I mean. And they were trying to tell folks. And then Joe Rogan had the job of being like, you wait till you see this guy. Wait till you see this guy. It's kind of like that. It's a little bit of trying to be like, there's as your point, a little bit of mystery. Like, let's create an incentive for people to tune in to the pay-per-view because they don't know who he is. They want to see what he's all about. He's got his cool mystique. The only thing he's up against, I saw a stat. I think it was, forgive me if I get this wrong, I think from Andy Hickey. A Japanese fighter has never won a UFC title fight. They're 0-6-1. The one who made out without losing was Cal Uno. Remember you all had the draw for the lightweight title. And that is it. So all the rest of them have lost. And there's been some, you might ask, like, have there been good Japanese fighters? You bet your ass there have been good Japanese fighters who have fought for titles. You know what I mean? So this is that alone, all these things kind of make it kind of like a cool and interesting moment. I like it. I dig it.
So obviously Kai, man, super explosive. He's had a couple of losses over in Japan, but obviously he brings an excitement and a dynamic striking style, and he goes for it every single fight. Pantoja, though, he's known for going the distance and sort of dragging people into deep water. He's kind of like a master of slowing things down and slowly sort of challenging people to hang in there with him. It's probably not the best matchup for Kai. How do you sort of see this one playing out? Because he mentions, he could knock Pantoja out at any moment. And I guess this is what keeps us engaged in the fight, right? Because it could happen at any moment.
It could happen at any moment. Listen, Kai Asakura is not the best flyweight in the world. I don't think that. And he's fought at bantamweight as well. I think the last fight was at bantamweight. So there's a question of like, how will the weight cut affect him? And, a big fight out of Japan and in the States, like there's just sort of a lot that's, that there's a lot about Asakura's situation, known and unknown. But when I say unknown, like informed speculation, that should give people pause about his chances. But here's the thing. We all know about the 35 rule. Now, Pantoja is less than that. He'll be 34 years and 7 months, but he's right up against it. And the other interesting part is like, dude, Pantoja gets hit a lot. He gets hit a lot. He is more well-rounded. He is an excellent back taker, as we've seen, grit and determination like you wouldn't believe. Remember when he won the title and he was like, do you see me now, Dad? You see me now, like pulled from the depths of his soul to make this MMA dream his. Like he's got the dog in him, no question about it, but he gets hit a lot. And if Asakura can do anything, it is crack. He can punch. He is a dynamic puncher. And I'm just saying, like, I'm not declaring to you this is the time. Skills win fights, and who is more skillful? Overall, Pantoja is more skillful. He's beaten better guys and he's done better things in this division. But he's vulnerable, not just as a style. He's kind of either at or about to be at a very vulnerable point in his career more generally, where, you go from being the best to, getting double losses like Volk back to back in ways that you never imagined. Like, right, you're at the peak and then all of a sudden it's downhill fast at that point. Asakura, who's still in his 20s, could easily usher that in. A puncher like that, and by the way, experience too. Like he's had a million fights as well. Again, Pantoja more well-rounded, but uniquely vulnerable in ways that Asakura could absolutely leverage.
Asakura goes out there, knocks out Pantoja in an impressive fashion. How big is that for the UFC? Because obviously it's not the most popular division, but having a guy like him as your champion, the Japanese market as well, having a Japanese fighter, someone who's exciting, and there's so many matchups for him in that division where it'll just be battles. How big of a thing do you think that would be for the UFC?
People will forget this, but there was a time where the three best countries in all of MMA were the United States, Brazil, and Japan. And then when you rank those, you would not put the United States first. You would have put Brazil maybe number one, or Japan number one, or like the one of those would have been 1 and 2 for a period in time. And the reason why I say that is because there were things that Japan always lacked. Like their best heavyweight prospects were Satoshi Ishii, who never panned out, the Olympic judo gold medalist. But even before him, Kazuyuki Fujita, he didn't quite pan out. They didn't have the same range that the Brazilians and the Americans have, right? The Americans and the Brazilians have been able to produce talent from 125 to heavyweight, right? And it's sort of like an interesting feature. That's not necessarily the case with Japan. However, in Japan's heyday, they could fill out numerous divisions and not just like have a 1 or 2 guys in there, but have multiple guys in there, as well as being much more, for a certain point in time, much more advanced in the women's game. They had huge teams, huge crowds, huge arenas, huge television ratings. It was just a much, much bigger side of the sport. Pride was not just a place that foreigners fought, although obviously, many of the very best were obviously, the majority of the best were not Japanese. They couldn't dominate in that particular way. But the Japanese also played a pretty integral role in MMA, not just in pride, but in the overall contribution to the sport in terms of how much talent they were giving away. Folks really kind of forget that, and it's important to note. So I bring this all up to say they've not had, given that record 0-6-1, they've just not had a Japanese talent they've been able to take back to Japan and really either rebuild the market, re-energize the market. And you just think about it right now, you got Inoue on the boxing side, who is a fucking phenom over there, competing in front of gigantic crowds in huge arenas, including the Tokyo Dome. I mean, just doing unbelievable shit. They've got nothing like that on the MMA side. Now, I'm not declaring to you that Asakura beats Pantoja, wins a UFC title, and all of a sudden he's as big as Naoya Inoue. That's really not my point. I'm just saying the public appetite for a celebrated Japanese figure of accomplishment in MMA is both long overdue and I think would be readily embraced, and they could build off something like that. It wouldn't change their fortunes overall for the UFC in the sport, but it could be a big driver in a Japanese market that was once arguably the most important in the world.
Speaking of guys that were once embraced as well, we got Cyril Gane versus Alexander Volkov. And it's an interesting one for Cyril Gane, right? Because we just spent basically a month or two watching replays of John Jones just beat him in the first round. We just spent, a few weeks of people talking about how he, didn't really show up in the John Jones fight, how John dominated him. If you're Cyril Gane right now and you're coming back into this fight, and you got that Cyril Gane stock ready to sell at a low price, how important is it for you to go out here and reaffirm to everyone who you are as a fighter? Because for people that haven't watched his career, haven't seen some of his good wins, I think the thing that stands out in their mind is just him showing up and getting beaten by Jones, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, there was a time when he was running through JDS and Rosenstrike and Volkov and Lewis, and you were just like, okay, well, this is the guy who won the interim title in 2021, and he was light on his feet and athletic and a quick learner. And you just didn't see guys like that in MMA. And then he lost to Francis in a fight that he could have won, but made some bad decisions in, and just showed like really poor wrestling. And I'll never forget, like, sitting for that leg lock rather than passing guard was just like the classic white belt fucking move. Classic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so he loses that one, but you're like, okay, that was a learning lesson. Then he fights Taito Ivasa. It was a little bit tooth and nail, but he wins. And then he just absolutely shits the bed against John Jones. A horrific performance. He did rescue it some by beating Sergey Spivak. But definitely, like, between time off, remember, he fought 2 times in 2022, 2 times in 2023. He hasn't fought at all this year. It's almost over. This is December. And again, part of that was fights fell through or talks fell through. And he was also, shooting movies and stuff. He was kind of busy. But, it's just been a long time since we've seen him. So, like, there's a lot of work for him to do, I think, in recapturing. Folks were excited about him. And then the loss to Ngannou didn't necessarily kill it, but it hurt it a little bit. But then the Jones one, like, it was like everything you were worried about from the loss to Francis. Like, it's almost like he learned no lesson at all in the Jones fight. Like, it was just no sense of improvement. And it's like, well, dude, if this is all it's going to be is you just getting by on athleticism and timing, well, then, yeah, this can't go very far. Like, for all your gifts, those are great. But if you're not even going to fucking bother to put this all together, yeah, you've peaked. This is it. You can't get better than this, no matter what athletic skills you have. And so now we're at a point where he seems to realize he kind of fucked up. And he seems to realize that if I'm going to do well in the sport, I have to be more than part-time, and I kind of have to take it seriously. And listen, people laugh at Gane, and they always say things like, how do you not know to take it seriously? Guys, have you heard of John Jones? Have you heard of him? Because he spent long portions of his career not taking it seriously and still beating the fucking dog shit out of people. But he got away with it because he's John Jones. And Gane got away with it too, up to a point. But he's not John Jones, as we saw, right? It is not uncommon for fighters to half-ass it as long as they can. It's usually after the first rude awakening, they're like, oh, this is, I don't know if his first or his last, but it's a big one. It's a huge opportunity for him to show us what he's made of. And you might say, well, he's already beaten Volkov. Yeah, but Volkov got better. This is not the same guy. And again, Volkov's stock went up since their last fight. Gane's stock has come down. Seems like it's actually kind of an important fight for the division. And for both guys, a key opportunity to either recapture what's lost or, in the case of Volkov, capture something that he never has to this point.
Quick break to thank Manscaped and NordVPN and SAILY for bringing you these programs here today. I want to talk about Manscaped first. What? Boom! The Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver is here. It is the game-changing tool that brings the luxury of a professional shave right into your home. Whether you're after that daily silky smooth finish or prefer to maintain a rugged 5 o'clock shadow, the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver is your go-to for precision and style every time. Head over to manscaped.com and join over 11 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by using the code word submission for 20% off and free shipping now. And what makes the Chairman Pro so special? Well, what about the skin-safe blade heads? Skin-safe full-blade foil for that close, smooth shave when you're looking to go completely clean. And clean shave isn't your style, that's okay. Just switch to the skin-safe stubble trimmer to keep your stubble looking sharp and polished. Both heads are designed with the skin-safe technology to help reduce razor burn and irritation so your skin feels smooth and comfortable after every single shave. Go to Manscaped right now and use the code word submission. You can use it across the whole website. The Chairman Pro, you can get the Lawnmower 5.0, what about the Beard Hedger, all sorts of great products, 20% off, and you're helping the program, and you get free shipping. That's at Manscaped right now. I also want to welcome SAILY to Submission Radio. What is SAILY? This thing is an absolute game changer. It is a new eSIM service app brought to you by Nord Security, where you can choose several affordable eSIM plans over 160 countries and 8 regions. With SAILY eSIM, you'll always have a connection when needed. If you've ever been lost abroad or badly needed an internet connection with no Wi-Fi spot in sight, you'll understand what a difference a local SIM card can make. An eSIM provides the internet connection wherever you travel and saves you money on roaming fees. All you got to do is have a look at this. You just download the app. Here I am here. I want to travel to Thailand, so I choose that, and boom, it's that simple. All you guys got to do is download the app, go through the prompts, and you guys are sorted. Global and regional plans. You save time. You don't have to wait in line at airports to get a local SIM card. You stay connected. No more wandering around looking for public Wi-Fi. All SAILY eSIM plans are compatible for iOS and Android devices. So what are you waiting for? Download the SAILY app now. Use the code submission. Or click the link in the description, saily.com/submission to get an exclusive 15% off and travel in style with SAILY this festive season. And by the way, guys, while you're traveling in style, why not jump on NORDVPN as well? There's exclusive deals right now for Black Friday for all Submission Radio listeners, where you get massive savings plus 4 months extra. That's 4 months extra, and you get that 30-day money-back guarantee. So why not try it today and see the NordVPN difference? And don't forget, you can use one NordVPN account across 10 devices with one single VPN subscription. Don't forget, you can get cheaper prices on things like pay-per-views, airlines, product, all sorts of things, online subscriptions. NordVPN has you covered. Jump on today and go to NordVPN/submission or click the link in the description below. Get that big saving 4-month extra for free thanks to the Black Friday exclusive deal, and jump on now before it's gone. That's NordVPN.com. And now back to the program. And, you know, winning an interim title after like a year and a half or like 2 years of training, that just can't be good for your mental game, right? Like just thinking you're the best straight away and then getting all the perks of being a potential champion and then realizing the gap that you actually have to actually be the champion. Like that must really beat you up mentally. Let's say Gane goes out here. He's able to beat Volkov again, which is going to be a very, very difficult task. Do you think it's going to be Gane and Aspinall next? Or do you actually believe that these negotiations with John Jones and Tom Aspinall are headed to the right direction for them to fight next instead?
I don't know. I'm not going to speculate. I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. You know, I think the incentive structure that has historically been in place makes it, okay. So I'll say this, given the incentive structure and how fights are actually made and what we know about, like people. Okay. Let me ask you a question, Dennis. Let me ask you a question.
Please.
And I know I'm trying to like reason with people here, like, because sometimes I think I'm being too much pessimistic. Who is somebody that demanded a lot of money, even a big name fighter, and the UFC marched over to the bank, grabbed the big checkbook and said, well, I guess we better write that check, fucking wrote it and handed it over? Who's that guy? You could say, oh, Conor McGregor. It's not him. They paid him a lot of money, but they didn't do that.
I mean, Fedor, nah. No. Lesnar, nah. No. Couture wanted it, nah.
Diaz, no.
Diaz, nah.
No
one really.
Just
right?
think about
Maybe
it.
Anderson Silva.
Not even him. And listen, that's not to say this is not an argument about fighter pay per se. I'm not arguing they haven't paid guys lots of money and millions of dollars. They of course have, but what they have not done is be told that this is our number, and it's like, you know, a number that is far in excess of what we know that they have paid guys in recent memory, certainly, and then be told, like, you know, it's this or it's nothing, and then the UFC was like, well, I guess we got to do it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just never happened. So the question you have to ask yourself is John being truthful when he says it's this or it's nothing? Or is he, you know, willing to take a lot less because for him, it's this or it's nothing? Like, you can make potentially 15 or more million fighting Tom, and then, you know, you take that or leave it. I don't know what he will do. That's essentially the crux of the argument. I don't know what he will do. So I just know that the incentive structure that exists, as we understand it, precludes it from happening. Something else has to change around it. But I'll say this: if it does end up being Aspinall versus Gane, That fight is amazing because I think both guys are extremely athletic and they use their athleticism in different ways. I think the stand-up of Gane is a bit more polished, but Tom is hittable. Tom's never gone the distance. Gane has. Gane can slow a fight down and maintain range. That's actually an interesting test. It's an interesting test. I love it no matter what happens.
I agree with you, man. It's. I feel like the UFC is almost like, hey, let's have a backup plan if this stuff doesn't work out. And Gane and Aspinall, I mean, the division's pretty quiet, so there's no many other options. Do you think this is going to be the last time we see Chris Weidman, by the way? Do you think this is it? I mean, the guy's had incredible career, Hall of Fame. You don't want to see someone overstay in the sport because it's brutal. Obviously, he's declined. He's had crazy injuries. I don't even know how he's even fighting. It'd be nice to see him get a win and retire. Do you think this is it? Do you think this is when we say goodbye to Chris Weidman?
I hope. Yeah. Which I don't even say like, you know what I mean? But he's been in decline for a long time. By the way, you hear my family screaming back there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I promise
there's
not
his boy. He's still their boy.
Yeah, no, I promise there's not a home invasion. It's just that my family doesn't love me. Okay.
Oh, come on, man.
Did you tell the audience the truth? Did I not tell them to please not scream before the show? Did I not ask them that?
You politely asked them to be quiet, yes.
But
you're on the end of Thanksgiving going into Christmas, brother, so I totally understand.
Bro, it's my wife and my daughter. They're the most beautiful women in the world. They have changed my life. I owe my entire happiness to them. But we went to this bird reserve, this aviary in Colombia, and when you walk in, there is giant parrots everywhere, and they're so loud. They're squawking at each other. And in Spanish, a parrot is a guacamaya. So I call them when they're walk, 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 squawking at each other, just yelling, las guacamayas están aquí. Oh my God. Anyway, what were we talking about? I forgot.
No, but we were just talking about Chris Weidman. Dude, listen, I think it's going to be interesting. It's fine. It's interesting how this storyline continues into next weekend in Miami with Covington and Buckley. Just quickly, we won't get a chance to talk about it. What do you think of that fight? I mean, the narrative will continue. And if Covington beats Buckley here and puts in an impressive performance, he's back somewhat in there, right? Like you can't just, although I know a lot of people are saying, look, Covington, that last performance, he's ducking people, but Buckley is far from just like an easy fight with a person who's, past their prime. He's still a dangerous guy.
Okay, very quickly on Weidman, he's been in decline for some time. He's had an enormous amount of injuries, to say nothing of the brain trauma. I hope that this is the end for his health's sake, and I'll leave it at that. Yeah. In terms of Covington and Buckley, dude, all anyone is ever asking of Covington is to fight somebody relevant and then try. Like, this idea, like, I'm going to keep fighting, guys who are at the end of their careers, or just luck into title shots and then you shit the bed. Like, nobody, like, this is a waste of everybody's time. But if you're going to stay active and, he's trying to pick on like 155ers like Dustin Poirier. No, fight another welterweight. Well, here you go. Here is one. Buckley. Dude, if Covington wins this, to your point, he is absolutely back in the mix in a way he would have earned. Just, it is what it is. On the other hand, if you're Buckley, obviously you're going to get a win over a name that a lot of fans know, and it's going to be on, free TV. There's some value to that as well. So I like the stakes in either case. Who's coming, who's going? A fun opportunity to find out.
All right. How can we check out all the content this week, Luke? You're doing the live watch along, which I love. Yep. Right? That's coming back.
Yeah.
What else do we have cooking this week?
So I've got Lamont Roach, but I don't know when is this video coming out?
It's going to come out today, which is
Australia time. You guys are in the future.
Time Monday. We're in the future, or Tuesday here.
Yeah, you're in the future, unlike us. Yeah. So I'll just say this: so on Tuesday here in the States, it's Lamont Roach versus the Tank Davis, Gervonta Davis, press conference. I did an hour-long sit-down at his gym with Lamont Roach. That'll be up on my channel, so you guys can check that out. That's a fun opportunity. But then, of course, on Saturday, all MMA stuff. We'll watch the co-main event and the main event together, and then do the post-fight show. Lots of reaction, lots of technique breakdown, fun times.
All right, well, check the description and the link under this video for Luke's channel and some links on how you can watch the best. I reckon this is that's the best watch along, I think, in MMA. So it's my favorite to watch. Luke, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
After a crazy Thanksgiving. I appreciate you, man.
Salute to everyone in the Submission Radio audience. Love you guys.